welcome one and all to episode 24 of Teatime. I am one of your hosts, Petter, and with me I got my co-host, James.
Long time no see.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time since we recorded Titan Tea Time now. It's
It really has.
probably because we're doing this one sort of later in the month, and we did the previous one earlier in the month than we ever had. So, yeah, the gap is a bit longer, but still monthly, still releasing one time each month, and we will keep that up, at least for a while. Anyway, the topic in today's
What
episode.
I well, just real quick, it feels like the journey from the last chapter releasing till now has, or even just the final volume releasing in Japan,
Oh, yeah.
has been really long and dragged out. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
I kind of do.
yeah. So that's why it feels like it's been so long, even though we did one with You Hear Big Girls last month.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's anyway. Sorry, keep going.
And as you can see from the title of this episode, we are going to be focusing on the new pages that were added to the final chapter in the final volume, since the original release of the chapter wasn't complete, I suppose. Not quite, anyway. And we are also, after we've talked about that will be the main chunk of this discussion. But later in this episode, we are also going to talk about the recent interview between Hajime Isayama and Hiromu Arakawa, the mangaka for Full Metal Alchemist, among other things. And also, toward the very end, we're going to touch a little bit on the new guidebook, or the character encyclopedia, or whatever you want to call it, as well. Oh, and also a little bit of an apology. At the end of the last episode, we said that we were going to talk about our favorite characters this month, but this felt more important right now, so
Yeah.
that discussion will happen next month instead. And with that all out of the way, let's get into it. There were two parts kind of in the final chapter that got some pages added to it, so I guess we'll discuss them in chronological order. So the first one is Mikasa encountering Ymir as she walks away from the battle.
I thought in the original chapter that this part with Mikasa walking away with Aaron's head felt like it was great, or it was kind of cool when she walked away and said goodbye to Armin. Like, that was great, but it did feel it was missing something. And I also felt that we didn't get one final moment with Ymir, especially how she kind of smiled the way she did, looking at Mikasa and Mikasa kissing Aaron's head, and that was the last we got of her. It felt like that there would have been more.
Right.
I don't know if I had that complaint, or I mentioned that complaint in our discussion, but I definitely was thinking that going through that, Ymir didn't get as much as I had hoped.
Right, yeah.
But this time around, or with this additional page, we actually get a little more clarification, at least from Mikasa's point of view, on Ymir's, I guess, slavery to love, or at least basically why she was a prisoner for so long.
Yeah, and I agree, like, getting this little extra, even though it wasn't much, it was really just like 2 pages, but it really, I think, it was effective in its own way, I think. And just the fact that we got to see Ymir fade away, I thought was really great. So, like, I agree with, like, well, your complaints about her not really having a presence exactly in the final chapter before, but with this added, I'm really happy with it. And also, just in general, seeing this brief little scene between these two characters that had a link sort of established between them.
Yeah.
In this very chapter, that link was established. So to actually get something, even though it's pretty brief, I thought was really nice.
Agreed. I think it shows that Mikasa does understand kind of Ymir's point, and that's why she was reaching, or that's why Ymir was reaching out to her through Eren in order to, basically end her long suffering, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So I think it strengthens Mikasa's character ever so slightly. I'm not going to say it changes everything, but I think it strengthens her character a bit, and also gives a little more insight into Ymir's frankly unhealthy thinking.
Yes.
I don't blame her per se. It's her circumstances, But because of those circumstances, because of the evil things that King Fritz did, and the evil man he was, yeah, she became a slave to him, to
Mm.
his love, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess the part of this all that gets a little confusing,
Hmm.
although is also sweet. But let's talk about the confusing part first.
Yeah.
Is you see a flashback of some sort to King Fritz actually taking the spear
Right.
to the chest and effectively dying.
Hmm.
I know I have my thoughts on that, but what do you make of that?
So I had a thought. I can't remember if I shared it in the text chats at some point.
Maybe you did.
I can't remember if I did or not. But basically this is what I thought about that is that I view it as, well, clearly it is some sort of alternate scenario, uh,
Hmm.
or to some extent, where she didn't sacrifice herself to save his life. And I think it can be viewed as a kind of alternate reality that, like the same kind of alternate reality that Eren spent with Armin in this chapter and with Mikasa in the previous chapter.
Hmm.
Like, and that he spent with potentially like all of his friends as well, because everyone in this chapter kind of woke up kind of from something, some kind of interaction with Eren. And the way I view, or the way I have chosen to view all of that, is that it's like he gave all of his friends potentially several years together with him, where they could kind of live out their shared dreams together. Like
Mm.
with Armin, he got to see the world together. He potentially, obviously, it's not shown explicitly, but the way I choose to view it is that they actually grew up throughout several years together
Interesting.
and just explored the world together, the world that they envisioned. The world, like, it's not the actual real world with people in it. It's the world that they thought was outside the walls when they were kids. And that was their lifelong dream, and it's what they potentially got to do thanks to Eren having given them that reality. Whereas Mika says as well the same thing, potentially. Them, the two of them spending a life together as lovers, which they never got to do in the real world, but in the real reality,
Hmm.
but that potentially they got to do in an alternate reality. Anyway, along those lines, and also side thing, potentially this also happened with everyone else, like with Jean, Connie, Reiner, Annie, everyone else who had this
Yeah.
vision, potentially. Anyway, my thought was that this is the same kind of thing that he gave Ymir as well, and that this is what we get a little glimpse of. Obviously, Eren probably isn't part of that alternate reality, but
Mm.
I think he still played a hand in giving her that to sort of,
Hmm.
well, to give her some kind of final happiness, a life without the torment of King Fritz, essentially.
Yeah. To be fair, it's hard to think who would have given Ymir that alternate vision or that reality other than Eren or herself, I guess.
Hmm.
But I do agree with you that I think this is not what actually happened, but it's an alternate reality, or basically because she's free from love, from the chains that bound her to King Fritz now,
Hmm.
if she could do it all over again, she would protect her children and not try to save King Fritz.
Hmm.
And now, is that a reality that she lives out, just like Eren Mikasa and Armin and those things that you were mentioning? Obviously, we can't really say for sure because it's such a short glimpse. But
Right.
I do like that theory.
Hmm.
I think it's also possible that that's just Isayama's way of showing what maybe she would have done, or what could have happened if she had chosen differently. But either way, it's I think it's good to show that although it did create confusion
Hmm.
from even
Yeah.
myself when I first saw it, I was a little
Right.
confused. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think it's good for Ymir because it shows to the reader and for Ymir that she's able to move on. Like it's not just the fact that Mikasa cut off the head of Eren, that she disappears. While that is key, she herself was able to let go of King Fritz, and
Right.
or I guess understand that he was a terrible person.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I took it. So I think we're pretty similar in that wavelength.
Yes, yes. Like yeah, and like one thing that I don't think I made perfectly clear, but that you mentioned, I think that like goes in both of our thoughts regarding this is basically that in this alternate like kind of new chance reality that Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
at least the way I see it, that Aaron gave Ymir, what did change and the reason why it turned out differently was because she actively made the decision not to sacrifice herself. Like she chose that, kind of knowing what she knows now, I guess, and that
Mm.
gave her a new life that she could maybe die with some new happiness that she wouldn't have had otherwise, potentially. But yeah, I kind of like to view it that way.
Right, and I think that's beautiful because, like I said before, it's confusing, but it's also sweet because she gets that moment with her three daughters,
Yeah.
and we already know what happened to them in the actual timeline, which is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But to see them be with their mother, who truly loved them, I think it was a very nice ending for her. And I remember the theories going into the final arc about Ymir was, I mean, I know I brought this up, some sort of reincarnation, so she can have a peaceful life.
Right.
But I think this is a great way for her to have peace, uh, and a bit of happiness before moving on. Spending that time with her children. So
Mm.
I really enjoyed that part.
Definitely. Absolutely. Anything more on those couple pages?
I don't think so.
Right. So that takes us to the last couple of pages that are at the very end of the volume. And I guess the thing I wanted to touch on first of all here is Mikasa's future husband. I've seen many that think it's Jean, and I don't blame people for thinking that. I can see that,
Yeah.
given what we do see of him, it could pass for Jean, it definitely could. However, I personally don't think it really matters, and I don't care too much about the identity of that man.
Right.
What do you think of all of that?
You know, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, she moved on. That's good.
Hmm.
I thought it because some people's complaints I remember when the final chapter dropped was, oh, Mikasa doesn't move on. She's stuck on Aaron. That's terrible.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, that's her choice. Like, I don't think it's, people don't have to marry or have to have a relationship all the time. Some people only have one love. So I was okay with it. And then you see this, and I think it answers that complaint that people had
Yeah.
about her being able to continue on with her life. I didn't see an issue with it. I know I would say I was okay with the other one, but I'm also okay with her finding a husband and having a family because that's her choice. You know,
Yeah.
it's not like she's being forced to do that. I mean, she's a fictional character, so I guess technically the writer is forcing her to give it. Anyway,
Well, now we're going a bit too
if we want to
meta,
get
maybe.
technical. Anyway, but it wasn't until people like the rumors were saying it was the leaks were saying it was John or Jean. I say John, Jean,
Mm.
and that Aaron Mikasa's ship is dead. That's when it's just started bothering me because people were taking it as a way to get at other people in the fandom
Uh-huh.
or trying to rub it in people's faces when there's no evidence that it is Jean. It could be. When I first read it, when I first saw it, I just thought it was just kind of a nobody person.
Pharmacune.
Yeah, a farmer, exactly, a farmer could. I mean, the back of the head it looks very similar. And I've
Right.
seen some people try to argue that it's actually Jean's head, but even that, I don't think the hairstyle matches up exactly. And there's no beard like Jean, and Jean was so
Well,
proud of the beard.
this
I guess technically
true.
he could shave it.
This could also, like, this is probably at least several years in the future that when we see that. So I'm definitely not ruling out the possibility of it being Jean, but I also
Right.
definitely don't like. I don't believe in anything specifically. I don't think.
Right. And yeah, to be clear, I'm not ruling it out that it is John. It could easily be John, but but for people to take it so far as to say the Aaron and Mikasa relationship is dead or whatever. Well, I mean, of course it's dead. Like Aaron died, but it doesn't mean that they didn't love each other or it
Right.
wasn't in game or whatever. Anyway, I think the point that people are missing is that Mikasa loved Aaron her entire life. You know,
Hmm.
even it's a Titanic ending. I don't think Isayama has will admit it, but it's a Titanic ending. Spoilers for a 30-year-old movie now.
It's old anyway. Yes. And I agree there. Like her love for him was so strong. I think that it wouldn't die like that. Sure, she may have been able to love someone else and have a family with someone else, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that she didn't love Aaron, and it doesn't mean that he didn't love her. Like
Yeah.
their love for each other is like, and to take it from me, I wasn't an Eren Mikasa shipper necessarily for most of the manga. It was basically not
It's
until the
true.
very last chapter when I
Hmm.
actually kind of went over to that side. But I still think like the ship between them is real. I don't
Right.
identify as a shipper necessarily. I guess sometimes, but anyway, whatever.
No, I,
They
I get it. I get it.
they loved each other, and that's all
Yeah.
that matters.
Right. I completely agree. And I think the story that Isayama was trying to tell was a tragic love story. If you go back to, well, I mean, not, I mean, that's not the only thing. I want to make that clear. I'm just saying,
Mm,
when it comes with to Eren Mikasa, it's a tragic love story,
right,
not something that was ever supposed to be happily ever after.
right.
And the reason why I say that is the original like draft that he made for Attack on Titan when he was, I think, when he was pitching it,
Mhm.
involved a guy who was fighting Titans and eventually turned into one, and somehow he sacrificed himself in order to protect the one he loved.
Oh yeah, are you talking about the one that's referred to nowadays as Chapter Zero?
Yes, that's the one I'm
Yeah,
referring
it's been
to.
a long time since I read that, so I don't remember it super clearly. But right, right,
Right. I think that was always his intention, is to have the the main character sacrifice himself for the person he loved.
right.
Now, obviously, the extent of that is different, but at the end of the day, it's still sacrificing himself.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think that if people understand that not every story is gonna be the Disney happily ever after ending, especially Attack on Titan, I, I think once people understand that, they can better accept what happens in this, and not just the I guess the romance or the shipping, but also the how it completely ends.
Hmm.
But before we get to that, there's also people trying to argue that this the Mikasa's husband is actually not her husband, but
Oh,
it's Armin.
whoa.
And,
Wait, what?
and yeah, it's ridiculous, dude. They're arguing that it's Armin,
Okay.
and they have an adopted child there, but they're not married because that it's Annie and Armin. It's so convoluted, man.
What?
These
Why?
people are grasping on straws. It's such copium. I don't get it.
I'm
It
so-
makes absolutely no sense. But that's the thing. It
yeah.
was left so open to interpretation. You can get some crazy interpretations like that.
True. I mean, that is pretty funny. I got a really good laugh out of that, so I'm kind of happy that some people said that just because I laughed.
Yeah,
Because.
I laugh every time I see it.
Ah.
I see it so much on Facebook and Twitter. It's like, what?
Oh.
It's like people just don't want to believe that Mikasa would marry someone else.
Hmm.
Whatever.
Well, well. Interesting. Anything more on Mikasa's husband?
I've heard some people say they feel bad for the guy because he'll never be able to take Aaron's place.
Ah.
And to an extent, I can
Mm.
see where people are coming from. But at the same time, I think people have the ability to love more than one person, even
Yes.
if the first person that they love is, the love of their life and passes away tragically.
Hmm.
I think people can romantically love someone else.
Absolutely.
Now, it being John, maybe that would be a little difficult because John does know Aaron, and maybe there
Uh-huh.
could be some issues there. But I don't, I don't know. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. So
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And speaking of that, like the fact, yeah, like cause I agree. Like it being someone else, like someone we don't know, someone who didn't know Aaron, like someone that doesn't really matter to the story. Just thinking about it spontaneously, at least, without putting too much thought into it, because I don't feel like doing that. That makes it simpler and probably easier compared to Jean,
mm,
as you said, like because that might make it slightly more complicated.
mm-hmm.
But I have also seen a lot of funny jokes, kind of about it being Jean, and also the funny thing about how we've seen him in on two occasions in the story he dressed up as Aaron, like with a wig and all.
Yeah,
And so that
yeah.
makes it kind of funny if he would do that like in their
Oh
relationship.
god.
I just laugh at that. I think that's kind of
Uh,
silly and funny.
I
um,
mean,
hmm
yeah. I don't think Jean would complain really at the end of the day.
as long as he has Mikasa.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that could also be viewed as a separate tragic love story.
I guess so. That's the new rom com.
Yes. A rom-com with a tragic ending.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, moving on, I suppose. What we see in the later panels here, kind of, we basically see time passes. At first, we see the island of Parody kind of prospering, it's growing, buildings are expanding and being built, and then, and well, we also see Mikasa dying as an old woman with a scarf still, uh,
Hmm.
which I don't think is weird at all. I have seen some people thinking it's weird that she kept the scarf her
Wait,
entire life.
really?
Yeah, which, I don't feel like getting into it. I don't. Well, I think we have talked enough about that.
People got issues, man.
To yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
that's fine.
I think we've already kind of defended that side of things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Anyway, and then many years after this, we see Parody. It's gotten destroyed by war, and a child discovers this supernatural tree. I would argue at this point, like,
Hmm.
because it grew. Well, it started growing like after Aaron's head was buried there. It started growing in a very kind of supernatural way, and well, obviously it resembles the tree that Ymir fell into, and I think what's cool about this ending is kind of how we're not shown what's inside of the tree, and we're not even shown whether or not the child enters the tree at all.
Hmm.
And that kind of open ending was something that I really enjoyed. I think even more so than the ending we had initially for this chapter. I was very happy with this. What did you think of it?
So when I first saw it, I was unsure because I wasn't thinking that it was sequel bait, like some people have called it.
Hmm.
I just felt that Isayama wanted to keep it more open ended and kind of emphasize the fact that the Titan powers, and if it's the centipede that's causing this tree to grow,
Right.
that supernatural power is beyond our ability to fathom. I think
Hmm.
that's what part of what he was trying to go for. Yeah. So when I first read that, I was like, okay. It took me a little bit to accept, but as I was thinking, I remembered how I felt when it ended in the magazine, and I remember being crying and being sad, but I also felt with the bird flying away, it didn't feel like it ended on a strong note
Mm,
per
mm.
se.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, but then again, I did enjoy that moment with the bird wrapping the scarf around Mikasa. I really did enjoy that. So maybe I'm disagreeing with myself, but I do think that this ending with the tree does leave more to the imagination, and
Mm.
it's more in line with the tone of the story, where the first ending was very much and they lived somewhat happily ever after.
Exactly.
um,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's actually one of the reasons why I enjoy this one more. Not only because of kind of the open-endedness, which sometimes I really like that, and with this one, kind of the way it was done, I really enjoyed it. But what kind of adds to my enjoyment of that is also the fact that, well, I guess one of the issues I had with the chapter the first time, well, through the magazine, was how Aaron's actions, which were obviously awful things, terrible,
Mm-hmm.
terrible on a global scale, absolutely awful things, that those actions seemed to have brought somewhat of a positive future. Like, it seemed to, like, based on the chapter, surely it wasn't all good. We saw
Right.
the island of Paradis turn into a fascist state. So, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, but
Mm-hmm.
it was still kind of like, it still looked as if though it leaned toward a positive kind of outcome, with the alliance going as ambassadors of peace to the island, and Historia being there as someone that they could trust. Like, all of that made it feel more positive than the negative, I thought. But now, after not only having seen the island eventually getting destroyed by war, we also get this, where like the possibilities are endless. I feel, with that final page. As I said, like, we don't even know if the boy, or well, we don't even know if it's a boy. We don't know if the child enters the tree at all,
Mm-hmm.
and if the child, well, if they do, we don't even know what's going to happen in there.
Right.
Is it gonna give way for some other supernatural ability that's not Titan like at all, or is it gonna be another era of Titans? Like, it could be anything.
I mean, it could be any. I mean, and this child, for all we know, is just exploring this area and has
Mhm.
no connections to Ymir or any sort of similar situation that she was. I mean, I don't. There's no
Right.
way this kid's a slave,
Right. Yeah. I imagine it's like a scavenger or something, like someone who's like getting by.
or that. Yeah, it could be hard times. I even thought maybe the kid was just hiking around, and because lives nearby even after all the destruction.
Hmm.
Anyway, well, because we see the destruction happen, and then when the child finds a tree, there's other trees that have grown pretty tall around it
Yeah.
as well.
Hmm.
Not nearly as tall as this tree. So I think a few, maybe a couple of generations have passed since Parody was even destroyed.
Right.
So it's
Right.
possible this child's in a well-to-do place is just maybe exploring or something. I'm not sure, but you're right. It could be a scavenger of some sort.
Right. I mean, yeah. Like, we don't know. Again, the possibilities there.
Right. Right. So many possibilities. And I think going to what I was trying to say earlier
Mhm.
is this tone matches a little bit better the overall story I feel than the previous ending. I again I love the previous ending because I do have a soft spot for kind of happy tear jerking moments,
Mhm.
and we still get that ending in the volume. It's just changed a little differently. And I feel like this change just brings it together and fits the story overall better.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, I don't think that. I mean, so a couple things about this ending. I don't think that it's fair to say that Aaron failed per se, or that Armin failed. I think that one of Aaron's goals, or at least what he saw in the future, was the end of the Titan powers, and that did happen. So to say that the Titan powers still exist is a lie and is not true. I've heard some people say that that was the case, and
Right.
there's
No.
no evidence that there's no evidence that Titans still exist.
Yeah.
Reiner and Peak and all of them lived a long life, as far
Hmm.
as we know.
Right. Exactly. Like, Reiner wouldn't have been alive like after that 3 year time skip.
Exactly, and that's part of the reason I'm sure he showed the time skip, that long,
Hmm.
um, to show that they were still alive.
Right.
And the other thing about Armin and those, I guess, peacemakers, I think for a long time, at least in their life and maybe their children's life, they fought for peace and tried to teach the story of their people and what happened, um, for as long as they could. But over time, people forget, and I think because parody was in the fascist state it was, it eventually turned to war, and because of that, you know, the world turned against it. I mean, and who knows exactly why? It could be an entirely different conflict. But either way, I think that they didn't have the voice of reason, Armin and all of them, to talk them out of it. And I think that's understandable for history. Sometimes we're doomed to repeat some things that happen in history, and just because war breaks out again doesn't mean peace, or the peace that was happened before that was a failure. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially considering this war that we see happening over parody or in parody, it's like several dozens of years probably
Mm-hmm.
after the Battle of Heaven and Earth.
Yeah.
It's after Mikasa and probably everyone that we knew in the story had died.
Right.
So the peace that they achieved, whether it was a good or a bad peace, like it was still a peace in a sense. Even
Mm-hmm.
if things might have been a bit shaky, they still did achieve peace there.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if just those kind of Jaegerist mindsets just kept the flame going, the kind of the fascist flame going to the point where the world couldn't take it anymore. So they, I guess, got rid of him, which I don't think that is necessarily great in and of itself either. But either way, I think they kind of had it coming.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people really upset about the fact that parody was destroyed.
uh,
Um,
hmm.
how do you feel about that? Is that something that bugs you? Does it make you feel this whole journey was for naught?
No. No. First of all, because of what I said recently about like, well, the Alliance did achieve peace in their lifetime, supposedly,
Exactly.
at
Hmm.
least from how it seems. Like
Right.
this war that happened afterward could be the result of something that we don't even know about. Like it might
Hmm.
not necessarily be related to the things that the story dealt with. It could be,
Right.
but it could also not be. We can't say for sure. So that's something that makes me be makes it that I'm feeling okay with this. And
Yeah.
the other thing that makes me kind of like it was the thing that I said a little earlier about how in the original version of the chapter, Aaron's actions seemed to have led to something more positive, but now we know that it didn't lead to an everlasting peace. It did,
Hmm.
things did eventually go to shit, and I think at least seeing that kind of makes me feel better about Isayama's story here. Like
Mm.
he didn't imply that Aaron's actions did the world too much good. I mean, it did get rid of the Titan powers, but I think that's about it as far as his good deeds went.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Aaron as a whole is such a complicated character
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in how he wrote him. Like he wasn't even able to, or Isayama wasn't able to establish exactly what his motivation was per se.
Yeah.
And obviously people have struggled with that, but I guess we can discuss that in a later discussion. We'll talk about characters at that point.
Yes. Yes.
But answering the question I gave to you, I think that some people, especially when we got into the Marley arc and there appeared a enemy state or another country that was out to kill parody, I think that's when people really started to feel kind of empathy with parody and wanting it to succeed and survive, and in some cases dominate, which
Yeah.
uh, um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know I'm not going to say I always thought that parody would be destroyed. I didn't think that, but I wasn't hoping that parody would become the top dog or
Mm.
not have any consequence for what it did or what it was doing.
Right.
So to see this how it destroy while it was a bit of a shock compared to what the ending we got before. I think that in the end it makes sense, and I'm not disappointed, or I'm not thinking that it was the whole journey was pointless. So I guess that's good. Yeah, and like you said, if anything, complete peace might be a little bit too naive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yeah, I actually rather liked this.
That's good. For the past few weeks, all I've heard is just people complain,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't found too many people who have enjoyed it. I think that's just because the people who dislike it are just so loud.
Well, that's always the case with anything.
Right,
Like
right.
negativity, it's always going to be louder than positivity, sadly.
Well, for the most part, I mean,
Right.
I think I could think of a few things where people are all come together and they really enjoy something.
True, true, and that's wonderful. Sadly, that's not quite the case in this fandom right now.
Yeah,
But
no,
I,
no,
I
no,
do
no.
I do keep up hope that things will mellow out over time, and people will look back at this in a more positive light, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but actually, speaking of that, I reread the entire chapter today in preparation for this. I didn't just read the additional pages,
Nice.
and when I did, I actually I kind of found like just like a new appreciation for this final chapter. Like
Ah.
I enjoyed it much more than I did the first several times when I read it back when it was new. And I think I said when we reviewed this and when we talked about this chapter on the podcast 2 months ago, I think
Mm-hmm.
I said that I rated it like either a 6 or a 7 out of 10, like somewhere there,
Yeah.
like 6.5 if we go with decimals. And but now man, I might even go as far as giving it maybe an 8 out of 10.
Ah.
I don't know.
Wow.
I'm super cool with this final chapter, this ending to this story right now, and yeah, just wanted to mention that
Yeah.
since we were sort of talking about things like that.
Well, I actually was going to bring up that
Hmm.
I think part of the reason why the disappointment's so loud right now, besides other people trying to uh, rub things in people's faces and egg people,
Mm.
is that you get one ending in the magazine and then you kind of get a different type of ending with the volume.
True.
And so people had come to terms with how it ended before, but then they get
Mm.
these new additional pages. So it kind of conflicts with how people were able to cope with that. For some, it's good. For some, it's bad.
Right.
And I think had all these pages been in the magazine release, I don't think the backlash would have been as bad. And I think people would have been able to accept it as a whole rather than in these individual panels.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think back when we talked about this chapter the first time when it was new, I think you rated it a 7 or an 8 out of 10, if I recall.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Has that changed by now, out of curiosity, or is it about the same for you still?
So I remember before the final pages leak, I was actually leaning heavily towards 8. I think I may have said 8.
Hmm.
I think I remember that in saying that in Discord one point.
Right.
But then when the leaked pages, I was a bit conflicted because like I said earlier, I do enjoy those kind of happy ish endings, the sweet endings. I am a sucker for that.
Uh-huh.
Especially they make me cry. So then we get this ending, which is more open ended, and or at least with in terms of the tree and the boy or the child,
Mm.
and a lot more bleak. It took me back a little bit, but I think I'd still give it an 8, especially because we had that Mikasa Ymir moment. I think
Mm.
that Mikasa Ymir moment really should have been in the original
Yeah.
release, because I think it adds a lot more context, important context,
Yeah.
to the overall story. So I think I'm probably right there with you at giving it an 8.
Sweet, sweet.
I didn't jump as far as you did, unfortunately.
Right, right. But yeah, that's really nice to hear. So, I guess is that it for the additional pages?
Actually, no. There was one more page that is actually just a joke page that he usually does for the volume, but he kind of added a little interesting thing with the attack on high school, whatever he calls it.
Oh wait, I can't remember if I've seen this.
Wait, have you not seen it?
Wait, can you explain it to me?
Yeah, so Aaron, Mikasa, and Armin are in the movie theater. Like this is the attack on high school, like the joke pages that are in
Right.
like right before the end. They're in the theater and they're watching Attack on Titan, like the movie,
Oh.
and they give their commentary on it. And Mikasa's like, "Oh, I thought it was great. It was such a great payoff, so beautiful." He says various things,
Uh-huh.
and then Armin goes off. It's like, "Oh, Mikasa, you did not read forums. There were so many theories going on, and they didn't answer any of them. And it could have been such a better ending." And Mikasa
What?
and Armin start arguing with each other. It's pretty cool. And they turn to Aaron and ask, "What did you think?" And he kind of shyly says, "Well, I kind of just like watching it with you guys.
Aw.
And if there's another movie that comes out, we should go see it again." Like, yeah. And the very last thing they say, and that's what ties it all together, is, "I can't believe there were Titans on the Earth 100 years ago. Is this really based on true events?" Yeah, more. I think they say more or less or something like that. So
Hmm.
it kind of gives, or it makes you think, like, is this an alternate reality? Is this the same timeline as the actual events? Because if you
Right.
remember, one of the shards that Aaron sees in
Mm.
I forget which chapter.
I think it's 120, I think.
Oh, 120. It references the attack on high school.
Yeah.
So it could also just be a joke or a funny jab, but it,
Right.
it does get your imagination thinking.
Oh yeah. I love that.
Are these reincarnations
Mm.
of EMA and all the other people?
Huh.
Also, Ymir and her kids are in one of the shots.
Oh really?
They're like walking on the sidewalk.
Ah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
Anyway, I didn't mean to like describe the whole thing.
Oh no,
People are like, yes.
it's cool. Like I enjoyed I enjoyed that. I'm gonna look it up after this. That's so cool.
So yeah, like I said, I thought it added to my enjoyment of the final volume, and maybe that's why I am more comfortable giving it an 8. But at the end of the day, it is just kind of comedic fluff, but very
Right.
sweet.
It's a very Isayama thing to do, I think.
Yeah, it totally is. Totally is.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So, with that all said, then let us move into our little talk about the interaction between Isayama and Arakawa,
Hmm.
which I think was a really sweet interaction. First of all, at least from what I saw, I got to see like a summary on Twitter of it, but I also found some parts of it that were a little bit more in detail, but like not too different.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a really nice interview and kind of discussion between these two geniuses.
Yeah. Before we go into the details,
Mm.
what I like about this comparison and interview between these two is both of these mangaka were influential for me in that I love Full Metal Alchemist and I love Attack on Titan.
Right.
But the way they ended their manga and their storytelling is completely different as well. But the way they ended their manga, Full Metal Alchemist Arakawa did it more in a way that all strings are tied and
Hmm.
it's it's one of the most satisfying endings there is. Like it's very very ends on a happy note.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Whereas Isayama, it ends tragically, tragically beautiful in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
and the main character dies. So it's pretty much stark contrast between the two stories.
For sure.
So I like that comparison.
Yeah, but I thought it was still like as different as they are as storytellers. I thought it was still really cool to see how Arakawa, who she's been in the manga business far longer, obviously, and to see her, or to for her to praise Isayama's work the way she did,
Yeah.
was really cool. And I can only imagine how flattering that must be. Like, what an honor that must be for Isayama to hear, especially since I've heard that he was a fan of Full Metal Alchemist before he started writing Attack on Titan. I can only imagine how cool that must feel.
That
you
is
know?
so cool.
Like, yeah, that's pretty amazing. And one of my favorite bits, really the only thing that I wrote down that I wanted to bring up from that discussion that they had, that I thought was really interesting, was how Arakawa likened Isayama's strong emotions, like the strong emotions in his works. She likened that with the strong emotions in Picasso's paintings, which I was, first of all, a really interesting kind of way to analyze it.
Hmm.
And also, then through their discussion, it turned out that Isayama had a copy of Picasso's painting called Guernica, or however that's supposed to be pronounced. He'd had a copy of that in his childhood home, like growing up. They had a copy of that painting, and he confessed to like always feeling kind of scared when he saw that, which was pretty funny. But also looking at that painting, because I kind of looked at it. I found it on Google, just looked at it for a while, and
Hmm.
it really, like, there's definitely resemblances, I think, between some of Isayama's Titan designs and parts of that painting, or at least in this kind of style, kind of the vibe of it is definitely, or gave me a similar feeling, which I thought was just a really nice little thing.
I could see it. I also see Jean in the background, and there's kind of a horse looking. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sure I've made Jean fans really upset this this episode, but no, I totally, yeah, I totally see that kind of warped, elongated body that's
Mm,
disturbing.
yeah.
It's interesting that that would be in his old house.
Right, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, like, as a child, you'll take things in a different way than you do as an adult. So growing up with that, I
Yeah.
can totally, like, it all makes sense now. Kind of why how Isayama has been able to create all of these fantastic Titan designs throughout the years.
Yeah. It was really cool to hear more of his inspirations. I mean, clearly Isayama was inspired by a lot of sources, and not all of them are mentioned here, I don't think. But
Right.
it's cool to see some of these more obscure works that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
Uh, this Minoru Furuya. Uh,
Mm.
I'm not familiar with his Himizu work.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that was also new to me.
so it's cool to see that and maybe inspire me to go and check it out and see what inspired Isayama.
Precisely. Actually, out of those various things that he mentioned as inspirations in various ways, the one that got me the most interested out of things that I just haven't seen before or haven't read before was a movie called The Village with Joaquin Phoenix in it.
Yeah.
Seems like a really interesting premise. And, well, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's a twist in the movie that I've had spoiled for me now, but it still seems like an interesting thing. And I'm a big fan of Joaquin Phoenix to begin with. So that's one thing that I would definitely be interested in seeing now, thanks to having read this interview.
For sure. So, slight tangent, but
Hmm?
I kind of mentioned this in Discord earlier, but I wanted to just briefly bring it up in the podcast. I I was watching Gundam Wing, which is I believe the second series of Gundam after the
Right.
original, and I also watched the original a few months back as well.
Uh-huh.
But it was interesting to see how, especially the main characters, took on situations and their emotions, especially in the first series, and how similar that was to Eren and the way he took on emotions,
Mm.
took on problems, and the conflicts that they would have, the kind of theories and world conflicts that they would bring up are very similar to some of the issues that were brought up in Attack on Titan, especially towards the Marley arc. So
Mm.
it's interesting to see that. I can't say for sure if he would have saw that growing up, especially since he hasn't mentioned that. But I do think the concept of someone being inside a Titan is similar to a Gundam
Well,
or a
yeah,
mech of some sort, you know?
absolutely. It's essentially a flesh mecha.
Right, it really is. And so I can't help but think maybe he took some inspiration from that as well. But it could just be that a lot of sources have taken inspiration from other things, and writing, Japanese anime writing at the time was just really fascinated with war and justifying it and what is true peace, etc., etc. So
Mm.
anyway, I think that it's really cool to see a famous writer like Isayama talk about things that inspired him, because sometimes we think that all ideas from these great masterminds are original, or that
Right.
they are not technically inspired by too many things. But even the famous painters of history were inspired by arts of other people, and it was like everyone was doing covers of another person.
Yeah, yeah, dude, totally.
I mean, obviously there's those who were very original, like Da Vinci, and I think Picasso was original as well. But Da Vinci, I'm pretty sure he was not Da Vinci. Galileo, no, well, whatever. Anyway, point is, I you can find inspiration in so many things and apply it to your own story and to your own world.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's cool to see that.
absolutely. Yeah. So, anything more from that interview?
No, I don't have anything else.
Gotcha. Then we're probably close to the end of the episode, but just one little thing that we might not talk about for too long, but just wanted to touch on a little bit is the guidebook or the character's encyclopedia. I still don't know which of those names is more accurate for this book, but regardless, it was released recently as well, and I have not. I mean, I haven't had a chance to actually look through the whole thing because I mean it's gonna be many
It's pretty big.
pages, and I don't even think all of it has been translated, even fan translated. I don't think. Anyway, it's out, and from what the parts of it that I have seen translations of, it's very basic, just like those sorts of books have always been. I have uh, one guidebook and one character encyclopedia for Attack on Titan, and this one, just like those, are as I said, very basic. That doesn't necessarily bring a lot of new info that, and like it's not much that wasn't already known through just reading the story. Um,
Right.
but a few things were confirmed, like kind of clarified, and what
Mm-hmm.
I thought was the most important to kind of get confirmed through this book was that Farmer Coon is indeed the father of Historia's child.
I knew it.
That's like the one thing that I'm taking away from this book, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, yeah. All you Aaron Historia shippers or Farmer Coon deniers, like, just stop. Just move on.
After
It's
this,
okay.
after at least this, yes, nice to just know that for sure, like 100%.
Yeah, I agree. But that's one of those tidbits of information that it works to have the confirmation here in this
Yes.
guidebook and not necessarily in the story. When Farmer Coon is not a player, he's not. Well, I mean, depending on who Mikasa married, maybe he's a player. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um,
Hmm.
he's not a character, even a side character, really in the story.
Yeah.
He's kind of just a device or NPC, if you
Yeah,
will.
he has no name, he has no face.
Okay, so small tangent, but I do think that Historia having a baby was. I don't think it was as powerful or as great as it could have been
Hmm.
in terms of messaging. But either way, she didn't have to have a child with a person that was important to the story. Like that, the story is not about her having a child.
Right.
Um, it was her having a child was for her own protection at the time.
Right. Yeah, like there was a reason for it, like within the story,
Yeah,
and then I guess you can think what you want about it.
yeah,
I don't love it as much as I would have liked to.
yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But
I'm there with you.
I'm cool with it ultimately. Like the story as a whole, I think is still a good story. It's just yeah. This is possibly my biggest gripe in the entire story, honestly.
Yeah,
Just how Historia was treated in the final arc.
yeah. That it might be mine as well. I'll have to think like going forward, but I think it might be that's pretty high up there.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other tidbits that you got from the guidebook?
No, I don't. Do you?
I don't think I do. Other than
Mm.
I I think that just for my own peace of mind to see that Mikasa's kind of mindset or what they describe her mindset is her desire to be with Eren and to live for him is not because of her Ackerman bloodline. It's because that she makes that choice. She makes that choice out of love.
Hmm.
And I think that is so powerful. And some people, I don't think, completely understood that within the context of the story. Not to say people are going to read this guidebook and be like, oh, Mikasa's a great character, or oh, I totally see where people are coming from now.
Hmm.
But for me, who always felt this was the case for Mikasa, just nice to have that in confirmation,
Right.
in text.
For sure, for sure.
And that's it.
Nice. Yeah. Good. Good. I'm happy for you. Yeah. So I guess that's it. Anything else we want to talk about today?
I think that's all I have. I'm sure I'll have more thoughts as we go through the months.
Yeah, I mean that's good. We have many months to come.
Right.
Good, good. Well then, that's it for this month. If you enjoy our content, you can follow us on Twitter at Umami Manga. And if you like this episode, please share it around with anyone you think might enjoy it too. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next month when we'll talk about our favorite characters in Attack on Titan for real this time. Bye bye!
Finally. See you later.